The following material may contain sex, coarse language, and violence.
Well, it's the end of the session, basically.
So it's 8 till midnight, get reading. By the way, you can just unclip that.
Might make it easier.
I'll try it. I'll see how I could go. On the front it actually says, "What ancient horror awakened? A moment of clarity sent me hence, wailing," and then it cuts off, "This moment already passes." There is a place beneath those ancient ruins, and the isolated village that calls out to the boldest among them. "We are the flame," they cry, "and darkness fears us." They descend, spurred on by fantasies of riches and redemption, to lay bare whatever blasphemous abnormality may slumber restlessly in that unholy abyss. But darkness is insidious. Terror and madness can find cracks in the sturdiest of armors, the most resolute of minds. And below, in that limitless chasm of chaos, they will realize the truth of it. "We are not the flame," they will cry out. "We are but moths, and we are doomed!" And their screams will echo amidst the pitiless Cycloptean stones. And there's a picture of a manor on a hill. And it looks like it's on a hill.
Would that manor look like the one we flew past?
No.
Okay.
And in the front of this bit it also says, "I must gain access to the manor." Something, the writing is faded. "Library, I have sacrificed so much for. The dark must not rise, and Oulu, I can." It looks like Oulu. I don't know what that is. Or maybe it's only. Oh, it's only, but part of the letters have faded away. "Mastery over life and death was chief among my early pursuits. I began in humility, but my ambition was limitless. Who could have divined the prophetic import of something as unremarkable as a twitch in the leg of a dead rat? I entertained a delegation of experts from overseas, eager to plumb the depths of their knowledge and share with them certain techniques and alchemical processes I had found to yield wondrous and terrifying results. Having learned all that I could from my visiting guests, I murdered them as they slept."
What?
He murdered them in their sleep after he
Got their
everything he could from them. At least so he thought. "I brought my colleagues back with much of their intellect intact, a remarkable triumph for even the most experienced necromancer. Freed from the trappings of their humanity, they plied their terrible trade anew, the dead reviving the dead, on and on down the years, forever." Wait, is that the same? There is another. So there's it's expanded, I think. There are more buildings in the picture. "I had collected many rare and elusive volumes on ancient herbal properties, and was sent to enjoy several weeks immersed in comfortable study. My work was interrupted, however, by a singularly striking young woman, who insisted on repeated calls to the house. Her knowledge of horticulturalism and its role in various arcane practices impressed me greatly. My licentious impulse gave way to a genuine professional respect, and together we began to plant, harvest, and brew. As time wore on, her wild policy of self-experimentation grew intolerable. She quaffed all manner of strange fungi, herbs, and concoctions, intent on gaining some insight into the horror we both knew to be growing beneath us. The change in her was appalling, and no longer able to stomach it, I sent her to live in the Weald, where her wildness would be welcomed." And it looks like there was a silhouette of a woman at the foot of some stairs, perhaps? It is hard to make out. Simple folk are by their nature loquacious, and the denizens of the hamlet were no exception. It was not long before rumours of my morbid genius and secretive excavations began to fuel local legend. In the face of my increasingly egregious flaunting of public taboos, awe turned into ire, and demonstrations were held in the town square. The wild whispers of heresy roused the rebel to violent action. Such was the general air of rebellion that even my generous offer of gold to the local constabulary was rebuffed. To reassert my rule, I sought out unscrupulous men skilled in the application of force. Tight-lipped and terrifying, these mercenaries brought with them a war machine of terrible implication. Eager to end the tiresome domestic distraction, I instructed my newly formed militia of hardened bandits, brigands, and killers to go forth and do their work. Compliance and order were restored, and the noisome population of the hamlet was culled to more manageable numbers. And there is a picture of the various mercenaries around a campfire. The ways and rituals of blood sacrifice are difficult to master. Those from beyond require a physical vessel if they are to make the crossing into our reality. The timing of the chants is imperative. Without the proper utterances at precise intervals, the process can fail spectacularly. My first attempts at summoning were crude, and the results disappointing. I soon found, however, that the type of condition of the host's meat was a critical factor. The best results came from pigs, whose flesh is most like that of man. The great thing I had managed to bring through was brutish and stupid. Moreover, it required prodigious amounts of meat to sustain itself, but this was only a trifling concern after all. I had a village full of it, and there's this large, horrifying thing, and
Looks familiar stuff.
and a pentagram with 3 symbols in each corner, and then other symbols on the circle around where the points intersect and with it. Must be the summoning circle, I imagine. My zeal for blood rituals and summoning rites had begun to ebb, as each attempt invariably brought only failure and disappointment. Progress was halting, and the rapidly accumulating surplus of wasted flesh had become burdensome. I could not store such a prodigious amount of offal, nor could I rid myself of it easily, possessed as it was by unnameable things from outer spheres. When excavations beneath the manor broke through into an ancient network of aqueducts and tunnels, I knew I'd found a solution to the problem of disposal. The spasmodically squirming, braying, and snorting half-corpses were heaped each other upon the other, until at last I was rid of them. The warrens became a landfill of snout and hoof, gristle and bone, a mountainous twitching mass of misshapen flesh, fusing itself together in the darkness.
Until it sort of looked a bit like Sally Struthers.
And there was a picture, it's a very dark picture of some kind of undercroft, with light streaming in through a circular window. Oh, there's more writing in the front part here. Would be useful, but is easily distracted by food. Okay.
I knew that before we did the thing.
My lofty position wasn't always accompanied by the fear of office, and there was a time I could walk the streets or raise a glass in the tavern without concern for molestation. Faithful as the tide, one precocious village waif made it her hobby to shadow my every errand. It was charming then, troublesome later. In financial desperation, I struck a bargain with the ancient things that surfaced in search of sacrifice when the moon was right. The price was the delivery of an obscure idol and one other item of more troubling portent. The pact struck. My newfound accomplices slipped silently beneath the brackish water. A fearful stirring at the edge of the torchlight betrayed a familiar witness and gifted me with malign inspiration. Under the blood moon, I lured my wide-eyed prey to the pond's edge. Before she could properly appreciate her position, I clamped on a manacle, chaining her to the leering idol. A small push was sufficient to send both into the icy waters. and when at length the shoreline receded, jewels of the most magnificent grandeur lay scattered upon the shore. And there is a picture of a drowning woman. Prying eyes had become a nuisance along the old road, and so I undertook to receive my most curious deliveries by way of marine shipments. A sheltered jetty was accessible by a narrow stone stair off the back of the boathouse, and a discreet system of pulleys could hoist even the heaviest prizes up from the securely tied dinghy. I employed a crew of particularly unsavoury mariners who, for a time, sailed the four corners at my behest, retrieving many valuable artifacts, relics, and rare texts. Predictably, they increased their tariffs to counter my intense stipulations of secrecy. Such resources had long been exhausted, of course, and so I prepared an alternative payment. While the greedy dogs slipped off their revelry, I hexed the anchor with every twisted incantation I could master, imbuing it with the weight of my ambition and my contempt for their crude extortion. At the witching hour, the anchor pulled with preternatural force, dragging craft and crew down to the depths. They must have cried out, but no sign escaped the swirling black waters. And there is a picture of looks like undead pirate crew. Oh, I knew so much. And then the lesson was there, I had the vision. I scrolled in notes there. In those younger years, my home was a hive of unbridled hedonism, a roiling apiary where instinct and impulse were indulged with wild abandon. A bewitching predator slipped in amidst the swarm of tittering sycophants. Though outwardly urbane, I could sense in her a mocking thirst. Driven half mad by cloying vulgarity, I plotted to rid myself of this lurking threat in a grand display of sadistic sport. But as the moment of murder drew nigh, the gibbous moon revealed her inhuman desires in all their stultifying hideousness. Mercifully, the morbid encounter resolved itself in my favour, and I set to work pursuing degeneracy in its most decadent forms. The air pulsed with anticipation as I revealed the unnatural terror of the house vintage. But my exultation was cut short as the attending gentry turned upon themselves in an orgy of indescribable frenzy. A single drop of that forbidden tannin gifted me with a dizzying glimpse of a hibernating horror beneath my feet, and in that moment I understood the terrible truth of the world. I stood reborn, malted by newfound knowledge, my head throbbing, to the growing wine of winged vermin, come to drink the tainted blood. Oh wow, there's a very elaborate mystical series of circles upon circles. The scholars of today's pale. Then the writing cuts off. The equality of man has clouded their something. Truth so much is lost. Something is not enough. ... Ruin has come to our family. You remember our venerable house, opulent and imperial, gazing proudly from its stoic perch above the chasm. I lived all my years in an ancient, rumour-shadowed manor, fattened by decadence and luxury, and yet I began to tire of conventional extravagance. Singular, unsettling tales suggested the mansion itself was a gateway to some fabulous and unnameable power. With relic and ritual, I bent every effort towards the excavation and recovery of those long-buried secrets, exhausting what remained of our family fortune on swarthy workmen and sturdy shovels. At last, the salt-soaked crags beneath the lowest foundations were unearthed, that damnable portal of antediluvian evil. Every step unsettled the ancient earth, but we were in a realm of death and madness. In the end, I alone fled, laughing and wailing through those blackened arcades of antiquity, until consciousness failed me. And there's a picture of a very ominous-looking door underground. You remember our venerable house, opulent imperial? It is a festering abomination. I beg you, return home. Claim your birthright and deliver our family from the ravenous, clutching shadows. You are alive along the old road. It winds with a troubling, serpent-like suggestion through the corrupted countryside, leading only, I fear, to ever more tenebrous places. There is a sickness in the ancient pitted cobbles of the old road, and on its writhing path you will face viciousness, violence, and perhaps other damnably transcendent terrors. So steel yourself, and remember, there can be no bravery without madness. The old road will take you to hell, but in that gaping abyss, we will find our redemption. And the last picture is too dark for me to make out. I mean, maybe if I had some light up, but it is mostly shadow. Oh, wait, I think I know what it is. Or who it is.
It's unnerving, that.